C-Animate is for doing pseudo simulations without having to involve other departments and staying in the context of Nuke. So let's dive into the tool. Firstly, what we've got here is the tool. We have a lovely animate bar. This is pretty much the main crux of how you will drive C-Animate. If it's down at a value of 0, it will be at the centroid point, which we'll discuss how that's set up and how that operates and how you can modify that. But as you can see, as I expand, it does like a growth sim. Like, it's pretty kind of cool, and it's very, very fast, which is one of the key things that I wanted this to be. We'll have a quick look into how we can actually drive this. So first off, there's bandwidth, where you can kind of allow your animation to have literally a bandwidth as to how wide out it goes. So that's a handy kind of thing if you want to be able to have a bit of a fall off for whatever reasoning. But if you don't want that fall off, you can also just make it solid. This works for any of the external inputs that you might use, but we'll get into that as we go. So what I'm going to do for this case scenario, actually I'm just going to leave it live for the moment, but you can keyframe this obviously so that you can animate it as it grows. So we'll have a quick look at the internal path. So internal path is how it comes default. You can stipulate the starting point. It doesn't matter whereabouts you put it. As you can see, it is modifying as it moves, but once it has been positioned, that will not change. What is actually influencing that is the internal noise. So you can have that move around as well as you go, so you could have, kind of a cool globby effect that moves around, which is based on the noise. And we'll get into that more as we kind of go. So you could use this for a number of things, not just animation of like a growth sim, but also of a small particle kind of moving around your footage that has like kind of a viscous feel to it. Or it could be something very different to that. So we'll get into that as we move forward. But the idea of this is giving you, the artist, the ability to modify it as much as possible and be able to really control the outcome. We'll look into the noise. So the internal noise by default, so we're on internal path, that's where we're positioning it, and the internal noise. We'll go into it. It's practically your basic noise setup. There's nothing really amazing or special about this. It's just built in there, so you don't have to mess around with it. Now you can play around with those parameters and you'll see it gives us various outcomes as we go. So this is one component of it, of the noise, and that will, obviously have an effect as we do our growth sim. But like it's not really a simulation, like this is just it. Like the speed of this is incredibly fast, so there is no slowdown in simulation time. It is an animation. So we'll look at that with, you can see you can just play with it as you would any other kind of thing. You can mess with your gamma and gain, but there's really not a whole bunch of point to doing so in my opinion. But it's there as an option. You can change the noise type to turbulent, obviously, which will give you a different outcome. Noise influence is probably the next biggest factor. Now these two are fairly important kind of parameters to control. So in your noise influence, that's how much the noise is going to actually have an impact on how your animation actually plays out. So when we've ramped it all the way up, it has a huge impact on it. So you really need to be mindful of this parameter because it can have a very big result on the outcome. But you can also like shrink it down so it has only a very small influence, so it's just doing the edges, which can make it, useful. Something like a pool of blood, or if someone's been shot, you have blood seeping out of them. This can be a very useful matte for that kind of thing. So you can get very artistic with these. Or you could do, you know, a milk sim, or various different reveals. There's a whole bunch of things you can use this for. So moving forward from that, so I'm just going to leave this as kind of the default. There's also a noise viscosity, which essentially is a blur under the hood, to be quite frank. But you can reduce how viscous the fluid is, so that as it animates you can see a lot more detail in there. But I would recommend, if you don't want it to kind of have like these bubbles that you'll, you know, inadvertently get because it's noise, that you actually move up the viscosity. So that's kind of how we make it look a bit more faux liquidy, if you will. Hence the terming of viscosity being utilized there. I'm happy to show under the hood as well here, I don't really care. There are a number of things going on. We have, obviously, this is our internal noise. That would be our external drivers, which we'll discuss in a moment. We don't really have a huge amount going on in here. We have a little bit of an expression, which is for our internal path, which is just kind of stipulating whereabouts is taking place and kind of does the fall off for that. And then we've got a C basic ops, which is one of my other tools in here, running under normalize, so it's actually making sure that our inputs are running from 0 to 1 on both inputs before we have a dissolve. That kind of is where our influence is taking place, which, yeah, you can see, if pull that there, that is a direct link of that. Then we're doing some grading fun and inverting it back, because the way that this kind of actually comes out is a bit different. So our grading fun is actually, this is what we kind of end up with before anything, and our animation does absolutely nothing to this. This is pre-baked, if you will, hence it's like an animation flow. And what we're actually doing is we are using a grade to drive our animation. That is actually how we're going about our animation, is we're just doing 2 thresholds, and one's in, one's out. There is a band as well, which is actually how I am doing my offset. My banding is via an offset, so pretty straightforward. I just didn't feel like doing like the really hardcore maths for that. It's not heaps hardcore, I just couldn't be bothered. And this works totally fine. 100% will do what you need. And then inverting it back out. So it's not like really crazy under the hood. It's quite light. So how else can we use this, I guess, is a good part now to get into. So what we've got is, first off, how to do a different format. So first off, we can feed in a format into our reformat pipe, and now it'll function at whatever format you need it to. 6K was probably a bit of a jump in size. Maybe I should have chosen a smaller resolution to jump to. We'll just go to like 2K or something, something a little bit friendlier. Oh, HD, we'll just go HD. I don't think we were in HD to start with. Didn't pay huge attention, my bad. Give it a second to update. There we go. So HD, whereas if I don't have this, yeah, we're at 640 by 480. So now you can see it changes pretty quickly. As you get into bigger resolutions, it does get a bit slower, and I'm not going to lie, that is because of my normalization by my C basic ops. That's just kind of one of those things that if it's doing a search across the entire image, the more pixels there are, the slower that becomes, essentially. Which is kind of what it's doing, it's kind of not. I will dig through that one. I have been meaning to do a video on that for a while, so my bad. As you can see, it functions the same, now it's just at a different resolution, so that would be how you drive a resolution change. we're going to do a different path. So let's just say like you don't want it to be from a single point. So you won't see this point as well if you actually close this group. So it's kind of nice for being able to turn it off if you don't want to see it and you have a different external path. So I'm going to use a ramp instead, but you can use practically any alpha matte source, if you will. So I'm going to grab the external path node here. I'm just going to plug it in. I'm going to set start and finish. So in this case scenario, this will be the starting point, this will be the finishing point. So 0 will be the start, the next point will be, but think of it as like black is where you start and white is where you finish. It's a very simple kind of approach to it. I'm going to turn down how much the noise is affecting it. I'm going to say external path. And now we will have our path to be able to animate. So it starts at the 0 and washes across to where the 1 was. So as you can see, this becomes pretty useful. Like now you could, if we change our ramp to be at a different location, we could have this at the top of the screen and this at the bottom of the screen. I might actually invert around so we're running down the screen, kind of like in the matte sense. Now you have a simple, water over the lens kind of effect that you can easily manipulate for refraction or various other kind of things. You could even have a bit of a bandwidth on it so that you can have a bit of, variation and soft fall off. So there's a lot you can do with this, and it is exceptionally fast to run through, as you can see. Obviously at your higher resolutions it's going to be slower, that's just basic maths kind of thing. But it's very useful to be able to create a lot of these kind of looks that would normally be a bit more tedious and time consuming to get, and plus timing wise, because you can, this is just a simple slider, you can animate this quite easily and use the curve editor to kind of smooth out and create those easy ins and easy outs if you want. So, fairly useful functionality. And back to that. Let's explore the external noise now. If I put this straight to external noise too, because there's no noise coming in, it's going to do a straight edge of our ramp now, and you can see exactly how that's functioning. And it's the same if I switch it back to internal noise, it'll be using the circle, and you can just see it's just doing a straight up circle. So also another way of doing a very easy kind of reveal of an area via a circle. You could have a bandwidth on that still, so you could have a spotlight reveal, spotlight close if that's something that's required. But very quick to utilize and mess around with. So I'm going to go with external noise, but I'm going to patch in my own noise this time. So similar to last time, we can put a noise in here. Now this noise can be any kind of noise. It could be a texture. It doesn't have to be a noise as well. So you could use the texture of some smoke, or just it doesn't even have to be animating. It can be a still. It can be animating, but it can just be a still as well. So there is a real lot of potential what you can do with this stuff. In very simple terms, but it's meant to be a fairly simple tool. It's just more for getting a quick look without too much mess. So in this case scenario, we're going to switch it back to external path, and we're going to use external noise. I'm going to turn up the internal noise influence, so we can see that's not the same as the internal noise, which is doing this. We're utilizing the external noise in this case scenario. So I can, change this noise to be whatever. I could use any kind of cellular noise in there instead, and because of the design of it, it will just work. It's going to be very useful, very helpful for that kind of sake. And you can mess with the viscosity still, you can mess with the influence, how much it's influencing the outcome. Yeah, so all in all, it's a fairly straightforward tool, I feel. So yeah, hopefully you can enjoy that and find creative uses for it. I'm just going to quickly show you guys the flow I did for the teaser that I just created a few minutes back. I'll just get that open. Okay, so we'll have a quick look at this one. In the example that I did, which was for the outcome that looks like this, you'll notice that it's kind of a... Let me zoom in if it's gonna play ball for me. Cool. We get this like smoky kind of vibe coming through, which is, you know, it's pretty cool. As I step through, you can see like it seems to animate around, and it's also kind of holding some of the, like, holding to the body of the letters, if you will, a little bit. Not doing it massively, but I was just trying to sneak in a little bit of the feeling of the letters. So how I did this is obviously with the tool itself, but I did a few tricks with it to kind of push it a little bit further, and I will show you this now. So the first step I did was I created my own noise. This noise is not animated, it is just straight up basic noise. Is my viewport gonna play ball? Yeah, there we go. So it's basic noise, there's no animation, I've just set a value, I'm not transforming it, I'm not doing anything with it. I did do a transform of scaling it up, but that's just because the next step I need overscan for doing some distortion. So I am then distorting the image by two other noises, one in the red, one in the green, slightly variant from each other, offsetting them by -0.5, and then multiplying it up a bit just so that we've got some headroom, and then doing a bit of blur on it, just so that I can kind of get a bit of a smoky look in my noise. Now I think I'm animating these, or am I not? No, I decided not to animate them, apparently. I thought I animated it. Oh well, guess I didn't. I could have animated it so that the smoke was swirling around, but yeah, really the transition's pretty fast, so there's not a huge amount of reasoning for doing so. And then using the text, this is just a normal text tool that I've just modified a few of the settings. I do actually have a better tool for doing that, but yeah, I'm not using it in this instance. Blurring that out, multiplying it a little, no, not really multiplying it, I think I just did that for setup's sake. And then I'm doing a difference to try and kind of create kind of like curling around where the letters would be, in and out, just so that there's some sort of kind of interaction with the letters. Didn't quite work the way I wanted. And then I'm using an external ramp, so left to right. I'm using the boundaries of the texts to kind of whereabouts to plot those points. And then I've got a C animate. I'm only animating from the very first frame to the very last frame, so 1, 0 there. And that's it. I'm using external path and external noise. I don't really need this. That's it. That's not really that crazy. I'm doing some contrast afterwards to try and boost it a bit. I'll have to pick a frame where you can actually see it. So it gives like this kind of smoky look, which is funky. I could, you know, if I took out the letters and their influence, it wouldn't kind of look quite the same, so it's kind of wrapping around where the letters are. So you can kind of see what I was trying to achieve. I didn't quite achieve it, given I bashed this out pretty fast. I'm doing some contrast on it, so that was what it originally looked like, then contrasting it up. So yeah, that again, just so you can actually see the influence much more clearly, all those letters. the idea of that. Just so you can kind of get the idea that you can make things more animatic than just kind of, oh, they follow this path, that's it. You can actually make it a bit more cool than that. Doing a divide here just to kind of pop some of those aspects out a bit more. You don't really need to do this part, this is just trying to get a bit more sharpness in the image. So we've got a little bit more contrast to play with. Then I'm cropping it because like those make quite a big bounding box. Multiplying it by the actual text itself, so that's the text, multiplying it back over so it's being masked off essentially, but I didn't use mask just because of the drop shadow that you get from there. I know I could have disabled it, but I just used multiply instead. Then I'm just doing some color grading and some time offsets. So offsetting a little bit, doing a different color grade, offsetting a little bit, and yeah, that builds it all together. So it is all the same one, it's just they kind of animate one after the other. So you get kind of a smoky look, which is kind of cool. It's not overly complex, but at the same rate, getting that kind of look fairly quick could take some time, whereas this was incredibly fast. So, and also being able to animate it and play around with it and mess with the different looks. So I could have used, instead of building my own texture here, I could have just used a texture of smoke, which could be really cool. I'd be really keen to see what people come up with and then the use case scenarios for this. It is a bit different from solving because you kind of already know where it's going to flow based on these kind of textures and based on your ramps, or you know, you could even use a roto instead of a ramp, so you could really mess with it. Plus, if you use something like C iterate, which will be released soon, with text you can actually have it so that it kind of fades inwards, and that way you can kind of have it animate based on your text instead, if you want to do that. There's a lot of variations and ways you can use this tool. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with it, so I've put that up on Patreon. Thank you to my Patreons, and to anyone who has liked or subscribed to the channel. There are links to my Patreon page and Discord channels in the description. This tool will be available to my Patrons only for the first year and publicly on my Patreon page afterwards. There are a number of tools already publicly available there, so head on over and help yourselves. Download it, play with it, and have some fun with it.